All right, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to read chapter 4 of Flush today. I just want to review a couple things. We are going to have a test on Flush Tuesday, June 2nd. Just about the events of the story, the characters. I will publish a review slide of all the characters and the events for you before the test so you can take a look. Also, we're going to have the vocabulary test that Thursday. So those are our two final tests. The vocabulary has been posted. You should be studying on Quizlet through the flashcards on Quizlet. If you want to make your own flashcards, that's fine. Whatever, you should know how you study and memorize words best. These are words we've talked about throughout the school year, so it should not be too hard. It will be multiple choice, as will be the Flush test. So to review what's happened in Flush so far, we've met Noah. He's the narrator. He's also the main character. It's being told in the first person. His dad is in jail because his dad sunk a casino boat. The casino boat, Mr. Muleman's casino boat, was polluting the ocean. Mr. Muleman was dumping human feces, human waste into the ocean. It was floating down to the beach where kids swim, where sea turtles hatch their eggs, and sea turtles are endangered. So Mr. Underwood is passionate about the environment. He's also rash. He does things without thinking. So he decided he should sink this boat. He had tried to report to the authorities, but nothing was working. He wasn't getting caught. So he took it into his own hands and sunk the boat, or tried to. He didn't totally sink it. So he's rash, kind of irrational, acts without thinking. His wife is the opposite. She's responsible. She's, thinks things through. Abbie is Noah's sister. We haven't seen a lot of her. She's, thinks her dad acts without thinking, is rash, impulsive. And then we met Lice Peking, who once worked for Mr. Muleman, who Noah's dad wants to try and get to help him prove his case. We met Lice Peking's girlfriend, Shelly, who comes off really tough, but seems actually quite nice and intelligent. Today, for Chapter 4, I want you focused on a couple questions. I will read them to you now. 1, how did Bull get his name? 2, what did Jasper do to Noah after he hit him? 3, what did Noah do to Jasper after Bull and Jasper left? What happened to Jasper's John boat? 5, why is Abbie crying at the end of this chapter? So we're looking at, we know that something's going to happen with Jasper and Noah, and some character we're going to meet named Bull, and we're going to figure out what happened to Jasper's John boat, and Abbie is crying at the end. Our sort of critical thinking question I want you thinking about is, I'm going to read you a quote and think about this. Too many people these days, they just turn their backs or close their eyes, pretending everything is wonderful in the world. That's on page 47. What do you think about this statement? Is it true? Do you think there should be more people like Noah's father who are willing to go to jail for what they believe in? Could you be like Noah's father? So I want you to answer that question as well. So think about all these questions as I'm reading, and you can either make a Flipgrid response or complete the Google Docs. Okay, Chapter 4. The next morning, the lawyer stopped by our house. Mr. Shine looked about 1,000 years old, but Mom said he knew his way around the courthouse. She had hired him twice before to get my father out of trouble. Mr. Shine put his briefcase on the kitchen table and sat down. He looked mopey and gray, and his eyelids drooped. Abbie said he reminded her of Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. My mother made a pot of coffee and began dropping hints that Abbie and I should leave them alone. Abbie grabbed a bagel out of the toaster and ran off to play on the computer. I got my spinning rod from the garage and biked up to the drawbridge at Snake Creek. The police won't let you fish from the top of the bridge because of the traffic. but you can go down underneath and cast from the sandbags in the shade. Sometimes homeless people sleep under the bridges, but they usually don't bother anybody. The last time I'd been to Snake Creek, some woman in an army jacket had made a campsite high in the bank under the concrete braces. She'd even started a small fire, burning the wood slats from a broken stone crab trap. I gave her a nice mangrove snapper that I caught, and she had it cleaned and cooking over the flames in 5 minutes flat. She said it was the best meal she'd eaten in a year. The next day, Abbie and I went back with some homemade bread and a pound of fresh Gulf shrimp, but the lady was gone. I never even got her name. On the day Mom was meeting with Mr. Shine, nobody was under the bridge when I got there. The tide was running in from the ocean, and schools of finger mullet were holding in the still water behind the pilings. Every so often they'd start jumping, trying to escape some bigger fish that was prowling for lunch. I started casting a wide bucktail, and in no time jumped a baby tarpon that wasn't even 10 pounds. Then I hooked something heavy, probably a snook, that ran out 100 feet and broke the line. So this is all fishing jargon. I'm not that familiar with it, but maybe some of you are, but he's just fishing. As I was tying on another jig, I heard an outboard engine. It was a John boat, maybe 12 feet long, motoring along Snake Creek. 2 people were in the boat, and as it drew closer, I recognized them as Jasper Jr. and an older kid named Bull. So remember, Jasper Jr. is Mr. Muleman's son, and they've had a little run-in before previously. Jasper is known as a quote-unquote jerk. That's how the author described him, and a bully. So we'll see what's going to happen. They spotted me right away. I probably should have taken off, but I was really enjoying myself fishing under that bridge. So I set down my spinning rod and watched Jasper Jr. nose the John boat into the shallows. Bull was in the bow. He climbed out first and looped a rope around one of the pilings. He's a hefty guy, but that's not how he got his nickname. People call him Bull because you can't believe a word he says. So that's one of the questions. Why is he known as Bull? Because you can't believe anything he says. So Bull, he's full of bull. Let's just put it that way. Can't trust him at all. For instance, he told everyone at school he was dropping out to play double-A ball for the Baltimore Orioles. This at age 16, right? We all knew that Bull couldn't catch a pop fly if it landed in his lap, so we weren't exactly surprised to see him bagging groceries that spring at the Winn-Dixie. After Bull tied off the John boat, he called up to me, "Hey, buttface, better run for your life. Jasper's got a spear gun." "Yeah, right," I said. When Jasper Jr. hopped out of the boat, I saw that he didn't have a spear gun or any other weapon. Even so, running away would have been an excellent idea. I just didn't feel like it. Jasper Jr. walked up and asked, "What are you looking at?" "Absolutely nothing," I said with a straight face. "I told you I was going to find you, didn't I?" I knew that Jasper Jr. wasn't looking for me at Snake Creek. He and Bull were heading out to poach lobsters or pull some other mischief. But I played along. "Well, you found me. Now what?" That's when he socked me right in the eye. He socked me in the right eye. It hurt, too. Jasper Jr. seemed surprised that I didn't fall down. So was Bull. He said, "You got a hard head for a butt face." The way my cheekbone was throbbing, I figured that Jasper Jr.'s knuckles weren't feeling so good either. He was trying to act like a tough guy, but I noticed that his eyes were watering from the pain. I probably could have knocked him flat, but I didn't. My father's a large man, very strong, but he says fighting is for people who can't win with their brains. He also says there are times when you've got no choice but to defend yourself from common morons. If Jasper Jr. had taken another swing at me, I definitely would have punched him back. Then Bull would have beaten me to a pulp and the whole thing would have been over. But Jasper Jr. didn't hit me again. Instead, he spit in my face, which was worse in a way. He forced a laugh and called me a couple of dirty names and headed back toward the John boat. He was shaking the hand that he'd hit me with as if it were a crab or a mouse, as if there were a crab or a mousetrap attached to it. Bull was following behind, cackling like a hyena. They got into the boat, and Jasper Jr. jerk-started the outboard while Bull shoved off from the bow. I pulled up the front of my shirt and wiped the spit off my face. Then I grabbed my fishing rod and took aim. The butt-tail jig I happened to be using weighed 1/4 of an ounce, which doesn't sound like much until it thumps you between the shoulder blades, which is where I thumped Jasper Jr. It was an awesome cast, right? An awesome throw. I've got to admit it. The hook on the jig snagged firmly in the mess of Jasper Jr.'s ratty old basketball jersey, and he let out a howl. I gave a stiff yank, and he howled again. In a panic, he twisted the throttle, and the John boat picked up speed, but that didn't help. Jasper Jr. was stuck on the end of my line like a moray eel, like a fish. He hollered for Bull to cut him loose, which was all right with me. I'd made my point. Bull found a knife and clambered to the back end of the boat, which turned out to be a humongous mistake. With so much weight in the stern, Bull, Jasper Jr., plus the engine, the bow tilted upward and the John boat began taking on water. No sooner had Bull reached behind Jasper Jr. to cut the fishing line than the motor gurgled to a dead stop. The blue-green water of Snake Creek was pouring in over the transom, but nobody in the John boat moved, so it looks like the water's coming in the boat. Jasper Jr. was yelling at Bull, and Bull was yelling back, and they kept getting wetter and wetter. By now, the motor was completely submerged, and the bow was pointed nearly straight up in the air, which meant that the boat was about to capsize. Bull was the first to jump in. Capsize means it's about to go over, right, into the water, flip over, and it's going down. So, capsize. Bull was the first to jump in with Jasper Jr. right behind him. They started swimming like maniacs toward the bumpers of the bridge, cursing the whole way. They were making such an awful racket that the mullet scattered out of the eddies, and I knew that the fishing was pretty much shot for the afternoon, so they made so much noise. The fish were gone. So I reeled in my line and made my way up the slope toward the highway. And they were in the water, right, trying to save their boat. "You did what?" Abbie said when I told her what happened. "Geez, you're as whacked as Dad. It didn't sink their stupid boat. I didn't sink their stupid boat. They sunk it themselves." Abbie muttered in exasperation. "If this keeps up, we're going to get run out of this town. Mom will have to put up the house for sale." "Jasper Jr. spit on me," I said. "What happened to your eye?" "He did that, too." After examining my bruise, Abbie seemed more sympathetic. "From now on, don't go anywhere without Tom or Rado," she advised. It would have been a sensible plan, except that Tom's family was heading to North Carolina for the rest of the summer, and Rado was going camping in Colorado with his mother and stepdad. Tom and Rado were my best friends, and without them, I was basically on my own. Mom came into the bedroom, and the first thing she noticed naturally was my black eye. I told her the whole story. Abbie hung around to make sure. My mother was real angry, but I begged her not to call Dusty Muleman and tell him what Jasper Jr. had done. "It'll only make things worse." "It'll just make things worse," I said. "What could be worse than getting punched and spit at?" she asked. "Lots of things, Mom. Trust me." "Noah's right," Abbie said. "We'll discuss this later." My mother's mouth wasn't moving much when she talked, which meant she was still mad. "Noah, please go wash up. There's a gentleman waiting in the living room to speak with you." "Who is it?" I asked. "Is he from the police?" "No, from the newspaper," Mom said, making that sound even worse. "Apparently your father thought it would be a brilliant idea to have an article written about himself. He sent the reporter here to interview you." Abbie rolled her eyes. "You've got to be joking." "I wish I were," said my mother. "Hurry up, Noah, and put on a clean shirt, please. I don't want you looking like some juvenile delinquent." "Then you ought to put some makeup on that shiner," Abbie said. "No way," I said. Abbie suggested. "No way," I said, but it was too late. The reporter's name was Miles Umlaut. So one of the questions, I'm going to stop here for 1 second. So the question that you had to ask, that you will have to answer, are like basically what happened in the confrontation between Noah and Jasper and Bull. and so you can explain, right? Jasper, just to review, Jasper got out of the boat with Bull. Bull started teasing him. Jasper punched Noah in the eye, and then he spit on him, and then they went to get back in the boat. Noah took his fishing rod, got the hook caught in the back of Jasper's shirt, and somehow he and Bull trying to get the fishing rod off of him and the hook off of him, sank their own boat. So that was the series of events that you have to write about. So now we have this reporter that Noah has to talk to. The reporter's name was Miles Umlet. He was thin and blotchy, and his nose was scuffed up like an old shoe. Mom had stationed him on the sofa so he could set up his tape recorder on the coffee table. On his lap he held a lined yellow pad that was covered with scribbles. I sat down in the tall armchair where my father usually sits. Mom had dabbed some fresh-colored powder around my black eye, and she must have done a good job because Miles Umlet didn't seem to notice. He asked what grade I was in and what sort of hobbies I enjoyed. Did I own a dog or a cat? The usual stuff. He was pretending to be nice, but I could tell it was a real chore. He was dying to get to the juicy parts. I understand you've been to visit your father, he said finally. That must have been tough. Not really. I was trying to sound kind of cool and bored. Yes, well, this isn't the first time your dad's had a scrape with the law, is it? No, sir. What do you remember about the other times, he asked. I just shrugged. It was amazing that Mom had left me alone in the room with this guy. I knew she was somewhere hovering nearby, but at least for now I was free to say what I wanted. I found an old clipping about the Carmichael family, Miles Umlet said. He held up the photocopy to show me. That was a long time ago, I said. Are you sure? I'm sorry. That was a long time ago, I said. Only 3 years, he said. Are you sure? I asked. Although 3 years sounded about right. Here's what had happened. The way my father told it, the Carmichaels drove their 40-foot gas-hogging motor home all the way to the Keys from someplace up in Michigan. They were too cheap to rent a space at an RV park, so they parked along Highway 1 near the Indian Key Bridge and camped there for 3 nights, which would have been no big deal except for the way they treated their dogs. They had 2 chocolate Labrador retrievers that rode along with them in the motorhome. One morning, my dad was headed out on a tarpon fishing charter when he spotted Mr. Carmichael whipping the dogs with a bungee cord. I guess the dogs had had an accident inside the Winnebago or something. Anyhow, they were crying and yipping and trying to get away, but Mrs. Carmichael, who was the size of a whale, was standing on their leashes so that Mr. Carmichael could beat them. When Dad saw that, he sort of freaked. He beached the skiff, his boat, took out his tarpon gaff, and flattened every single tire. I think there were like 8 of them. He flattened every single tire. I think there were like 8 of them on the Carmichaels RV. Then he put the 2 Labradors in his boat and went fishing. The sheriff's deputies were waiting on the dock at the end of the day. My father confessed right away, as he always does. But he wouldn't apologize. He also wouldn't say what he'd done with the dogs because he knew they'd be safer away from the Carmichaels. So he took the dogs and gave them to someone who would care for them better. That time, Dad spent only 2 nights in jail before he let Mom bail him out. Eventually, he pleaded guilty to vandalism and I guess dog napping, although he agreed to pay for the Labradors and a new set of Winnebago tires. Later, we found out that Dad probably would have beaten the charges because the Carmichaels had refused to come back to the Keys for a trial. They wrote a letter to the judge saying that my father was a raving lunatic and they were scared to be in the same county with him, which was ridiculous. Anyway, my dad said that running those puppy-whipping lowlifes out of the islands was worth the legal hassle. A public service is what he called it. The 2 chocolate labs ended up with some friends of ours, nice people who run an Italian restaurant down in Marathon. I listened while Miles Umlet went through the whole story again. Dad just lost his temper, I said when he was done. But those people were wrong. It's against the law to treat the animals like that. Miles Umlet wrote that down on his pad, which made me a little nervous. So did the tiny green light blinking on his tape recorder. Dad's just got to work on his self-control, I added. Are you ever afraid of him? He asked. I burst out laughing. It was such a lame question. Afraid of my dad? Are you serious? Well, Noah, you've got to admit, Miles Umlet said, his behavior has been... Well, Noah, you've got to admit, Miles Umlet said, his behavior has been erratic, which means all over the place, unpredictable. His behavior has been erratic, unpredictable, I mean. I knew perfectly well what erratic meant. Dad wouldn't hurt a flea, I said firmly. But would he hurt a human who would hurt a flea? The reporter asked. That's when Mom breezed in to refill Miles' omelet coffee cup, or at least that was her excuse. How's it going, fellas? She asked. Just fine, Mrs. Underwood, said Miles Omelet. Noah's a bright young man. I felt like sticking my finger down my throat, like to make himself throw up. He was so disgusted. Mom flashed her fake polite smile and said, yes, we're very proud of him. She hung around for a while, making small talk, until the phone rang in the kitchen. As soon as we were alone again, Miles Omelet leaned forward and said, Noah, what can you tell me about the incident with Derrick Mays? Not much. I was sure he already knew the whole story. Everybody in the Upper Keys did. And what he didn't know, he could have found out from the Coast Guard files. Derrick says he was afraid for his life, Miles Omelet said. Maybe he was just afraid of getting busted. Here's what my dad had said had happened. He was out bone fishing with two doctors from New Jersey when he spotted Derrick Mays stringing a gill net near Little Rabbit Key. Gill nets were outlawed years ago in Florida because they could kill everything that gets tangled, not just the bait fish, but sharks, reds, snook, tarpon, turtles, you name it, it dies. So the guy was doing something illegal again, and Noah's dad saw it. To make things worse, the island where Derrick Mays was poaching was deep in Everglades National Park, which is totally protected, or supposed to be. So not only was he breaking the law, he was doing it in a national park. He was basically hunting in a national park, which you can't do. When he spotted my father, Derrick hauled in the gill net and made a run for it. Dad's skiff is super quick, and it didn't take long for him to catch up. Derrick refused to stop, so my dad leaped right into his boat. Then it turned into a wrestling match, and things got ugly. By the time the park rangers arrived, Dad had wrapped up Derrick in his own net, like a big dumb mullet of fish. But here's the part that really got to me. Not a darn thing happened to Derrick because none of the rangers actually witnessed what he was doing at Little Rabbit. Meanwhile, Dad gets accused of, assault. And then the government takes away his captain's license because they said he endangered the lives of his customers by chasing after Derrick at high speeds. Of course, the two doctors on Dad's boat said they never had so much fun, but that didn't count for squat with the Coast Guard, which is why my father had to start driving a cab. Miles Omelet said, there seems to be a pattern with these episodes, wouldn't you say? It's not like it happens every day, I said. The guy was definitely getting on my nerves. I was sort of annoyed at my father for choosing me to be the one to be interviewed. The only reason I knew was that Mom had refused to do it. Let's talk about what happened to the Coral Queen, said Miles Omelet, and he droned through that whole story. He told me that Dusty Muleman denied flushing polluted water from his gambling boat, which was no big surprise. Why would he ever admit to a crime? He threatened to sue your father for slander, Miles Omelet said. What's that? Saying something bad about a person that isn't true? Dad doesn't lie. He might do some crazy stuff, but he always tells the truth. Are you proud of him, Noah? That was a tricky one. I wasn't proud that my dad was sitting in jail, but I knew he was a good person. Even when he flies off the handle, at least he's fighting for something close to his heart. Too many people these days, they just turn their backs or close their eyes, pretending everything is wonderful in the world. Well, it's not. So there's that quote that you have to think about is, what do you think? Is this true? Do too many people these days just turn their backs when people are doing things wrong? When the environment's being polluted or something unjust is happening? Are we pretending everything's wonderful? Do you think people should be more like Noah's dad and fight? Maybe go to jail, fight for what they think is right? So that's a question that you guys need to answer on Flipgrid or Google Docs. We're almost done. 2 more pages. So here's a quote again. I knew he was a good person. Even when he flies off the handle, loses his temper, at least he's fighting for something close to his heart. Too many people these days, they just turn their backs or close their eyes, pretending everything is wonderful in the world. Well, it's not. I am proud of my father, I said to Miles Omelette, for standing up for what he believes in. But like I said, once in a while he goes too far. Miles Omelette jotted down every word. Your dad said he considers himself a political prisoner. Would you agree with that? Political prisoner, I thought. Oh, give me a break. I knew Mom wasn't eavesdropping because she would have blown a fuse. She would have gone crazy. I don't know much about politics, I said carefully, but he's definitely a prisoner. Miles Omelette seemed to think that was very funny. He wrote it down, closed his notebook, switched off his tape recorder. Thank you, Noah. That was perfect. Then he shook my hand and skittered out the front door. My mother was still on the phone in the kitchen. She gave me a thumbs-up signal when I came in to grab some cookies. On the way to my room, I stopped outside of Abbie's doorway and listened. She was crying, which got me worried because my sister hardly ever cries. I opened the door to check on her. She was sitting on the edge of the bed with a box of Kleenex on her lap and a pile of pink crumbled tissues on the floor. I could tell she was really upset because she didn't holler at me for barging in without knocking. What's wrong? I asked. It's Mom, she sniffled. But I just saw her. She seemed okay. Abbie shook her head. That lawyer, Shine? She was trying to catch her breath between sobs. What about him? He won't take Dad's case? Worse, Abbie stammered. I heard Mom ask him. Here she paused to snatch another tissue and dab at her eyes. Ask him what? I said impatiently. She didn't know I was standing at the door. Abbie, it's all right. Calm down, okay? Okay. She straightened up, swallowed hard, and for a moment looked like her brave old self. Now tell me, I said, what was Mom asking Mr. Shine about? The D word, my sister whispered. Divorce? Abbie nodded. Her lower lip began to tremble, and her shoulders went kind of slack. So I sat on the bed and put one arm around her and tried to act stronger than I felt. Okay, so that's another one of the questions. Why is Abbie crying at the end? Again, they sort of suspected things were falling apart when they saw their mom's suitcase on the bed, but now the mom is talking to the lawyer about a divorce, so that is why Abbie's crying, and things are not looking good. So there's chapter 4. You can make a flip grid back. Make sure you answer all the questions, and or you can do it in Google Docs. Please keep up with this work because we will have a test, multiple choice test, on chapters 1 through 7, a flush on Tuesday, June 2nd, and then we'll have that vocabulary test on Thursday, June 4th. And we'll be wrapping things up at that point with, I think, one more reading log, and I'll give you your summer reading assignment. Okay, I would love to see some more of you on Flipgrid or in Google Meets Tuesday through Friday from 9 to 10, and we can chat then. Okay, thanks. I hope everyone is well.